The first message arrived while I stood beside my wedding cake, smiling for photographs. My husband's hand rested gently against my back as guests laughed and clinked glasses around us. Then my phone vibrated. "What have you done?" Before I could process it, a message appeared. "Megan is losing her mind." Then another. "The entire event is falling apart. Call me now." I stared at the screen while soft piano music drifted through the ballroom. A strange calm settled over me. Because at that exact moment, my father was finally experiencing something I had endured my entire life. Consequences. For years, he believed I would always rescue everyone, always forgive, always fix whatever disaster my family created, no matter how badly they treated me, no matter how often they chose someone else over me. I looked at the glowing screen one last time as another desperate message appeared. "Please answer." A slow smile crossed my face. Then I typed 6 words. "You made your choice. Live with it." And just like that, my father went silent. What he didn't know was that my decision hadn't started that night. It had started months earlier, long before anyone realized there was a battle coming. My name is Natalie Brooks, and this is the story of how my family skipped my wedding, destroyed their own future, and finally discovered who had been carrying them all along. Growing up in rural Alabama, my father had very simple expectations for his daughters. One would make him proud, the other would disappoint him. My older sister Megan became the favorite before she was old enough to drive. I became the disappointment before I graduated high school. Megan had effortless charm. People adored her instantly. Teachers excused her mistakes. Neighbors praised her endlessly. Men competed for her attention. Even when she created problems, someone else somehow became responsible for fixing them. Usually me. I was different, reserved, focused, disciplined. While Megan chased attention, I chased goals. While she dreamed about parties, I dreamed about serving my country. At 23, I earned my commission in the Air Force. By my mid-30s, I was managing operations involving budgets larger than anything my father could imagine. But back home, none of it mattered. To my father, Megan was special. I was useful. And there is a huge difference between being loved and being useful. I learned that lesson over and over. When my mother needed an expensive medical procedure insurance refused to cover, I quietly paid the bills. My father thanked Megan for helping organize everything. When Dad's small business nearly collapsed after terrible financial decisions, I stepped in behind the scenes and prevented bankruptcy. He told everyone his business recovered through hard work. When Megan's credit cards spiraled out of control, I paid them off to protect her children from the fallout. She never even called to say thank you. Still, I kept helping because part of me believed that eventually my family would notice. Eventually they would appreciate me. Eventually they would love me the way I loved them. I was wrong. I met Ethan Reynolds during a temporary assignment in Germany. He was a military physician with kind eyes and a calm presence that immediately made people feel safe. Unlike most men, he wasn't intimidated by me. He never treated my career like a competition, never mocked my responsibilities, never asked me to become smaller so he could feel bigger. One evening during our 3rd date, I apologized for checking work emails during dinner. Ethan simply smiled. "You don't have to apologize for being dedicated." Such a simple sentence, yet nobody in my family had ever said anything like that to me. Over the next 2 years, he became my safe place. When he proposed during a quiet sunset walk along the North Carolina coast, there were no cameras, no audience, no social media announcement, just the ocean, the wind, and the man I loved asking me to spend my life with him. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe happiness could actually be simple. Wedding planning started 4 months later. Because military schedules can be complicated, we sent invitations early. Everything was organized carefully, elegant, modest, exactly what we wanted. My mother cried when she received hers. My father barely reacted. "Seems like a lot of money for one day," he said during a phone call. That was his entire response. No excitement, no questions, no offer to walk me down the aisle, nothing. Ethan noticed my disappointment immediately. "He doesn't deserve this much space in your heart," he told me. I wanted him to be wrong. A few weeks later, Dad hosted a family barbecue. The afternoon was brutally hot. Country music played through old speakers while relatives filled the backyard. Everything seemed normal until Megan arrived. She stepped out of a luxury SUV wearing designer sunglasses and a smile that practically demanded attention. Her boyfriend, Brandon, followed behind, carrying an expensive bottle of champagne. The moment Dad saw them, his face lit up. Halfway through dinner, Megan tapped her glass. "I have exciting news," she announced. The entire backyard fell silent. Brandon stood up and wrapped an arm around her waist. "We're engaged," exploded with excitement. My aunt cried. My mother gasped. Dad looked happier than I'd seen him in years. Then came the second announcement. "The engagement party is already booked," Megan said proudly. "Memorial Day weekend." Stomachs tightened. That was my wedding weekend. I waited for the correction, the joke, the misunderstanding. Instead, Megan smiled directly at me. The venue only had that date available. Silence spread across the table. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, looks like we'll have a busy weekend." Nobody objected. Nobody defended me. Nobody even looked surprised. And in that moment, sitting beneath those backyard lights, I finally understood a painful truth. They hadn't forgotten my wedding. They had simply decided it wasn't as important. Megan continued smiling as if nothing unusual had happened. I stared at her across the table. "You booked your engagement party on my wedding day." She sighed dramatically. "Oh, Natalie, not everything is about you." Dad immediately nodded. "The venue had limited availability. Our invitations were mailed months ago," I replied. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Honestly, we didn't really think about it." "That's exactly the problem," I said. The backyard went quiet. Megan slowly placed her glass on the table. "There are two events," she said with a shrug. "People can decide where they want to go." Decide. The word hit me harder than I expected because deep down I already knew what most of my family would choose. Dad leaned back in his chair. "Your sister has waited a long time for this." I almost laughed. Megan was 38 years old. She had ended 2 previous engagements because one man wasn't wealthy enough and the other didn't fit the image she wanted on social media. Meanwhile, Ethan and I had spent years surviving deployments, long-distance schedules, and real challenges together. Yet somehow she remained the delicate one, the priority. Mom finally spoke. "Maybe one of the events could move." Megan's expression changed instantly. "Absolutely not." Dad agreed immediately. "There's no point arguing about it." I slowly looked around the table. Nobody was willing to stand beside me. Not openly, not honestly. A familiar exhaustion settled over me. The same feeling I experienced after 72-hour operations when every ounce of energy had been drained from my body. Megan reached for Brandon's hand. "We deserve our special day, too." I looked directly at her. "You knew exactly what you were doing." Her smile faded. Then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. "Well, your wedding is pretty small anyway." Dad actually chuckled. Ethan calmly placed his drink on the table. I knew that expression. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. And somehow that was worse. "Our wedding is exactly the size we wanted," he said. Megan rolled her eyes. "I didn't mean anything by it." Dad pointed his fork toward me. "Don't start drama." I stared at him. Drama, that word again. Whenever Megan created problems, everyone called it a misunderstanding. Whenever I reacted, it became drama. I stood from the table. "No," I said quietly. "I'm just tired of sacrificing everything to keep her comfortable." The conversation died instantly. Dad's face hardened. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not changing my wedding date." "Nobody asked you to," Megan snapped. Dad looked directly at me. "Your sister's engagement is important." "And my wedding isn't?" His silence answered for him. The drive home felt endless. Rain clouds rolled across the evening sky while Alabama pine trees blurred past the windows. For several minutes, neither Ethan nor I spoke. Finally, he reached over and took my hand. "You okay?" I stared at the window. "I think something ended tonight." He waited. "My entire life," I said softly. "I've been trying to earn my father's approval." Ethan squeezed my hand. "You shouldn't have to earn something that should have been given freely." The truth hurt because it was undeniable. Over the next month, The family group chat transformed AID's nonstop engagement party planning center. Megan flooded it with photos, dress fittings, displays, flower arrangements, designer invitations, luxury decorations. Every day there was something new, and nobody mentioned my wedding. Not once. It was as if it no longer existed. Then the phone calls started. First came Aunt Carol. "Honey," she said gently, "would it really be so terrible to postpone a few weeks?" I nearly laughed. Thousands of dollars in deposits had already been paid. Guests had booked flights. Hotel rooms were reserved. Schedules had been approved. But somehow my plans were expected to move. Not Megan's. Never Megan's. Then came my cousin Rachel. "Your father is under a lot of pressure." I heard that excuse so often it almost became funny. Pressure, stress, responsibility. Everyone's always had a reason to excuse his behavior. A week later, Dad called while I was reviewing reports in my office. The moment I answered, I knew where the conversation was going. People feel like they're being forced to choose. I closed the office door. They are choosing. That isn't fair. "No," I replied calmly. "What isn't fair is pretending this happened by accident." He sighed heavily. "Your sister is finally happy. So am I." Silence. Then came the sentence that changed something inside me forever. "She needs support more than you do." I slowly leaned back in my chair. There it was. The truth. Not hidden, not disguised. Plain and simple. Megan received love because she demanded it. I received neglect because I survived without it. The strong child always became invisible. After the call ended, I sat alone for several minutes, not angry, not emotional, just calm, dangerously calm. For years, I had mistaken endurance for loyalty. I had convinced myself that helping my family made me a good daughter. But suddenly I saw everything clearly. Every financial rescue, every sacrifice, every emergency payment, every time I had saved them, none of it had earned love. It had only created dependence. And for the first time in my life, I stopped asking myself how to fix the situation. Instead, I started asking a different question. What would happen if I didn't? That night, while Ethan slept beside me, I sat alone in the living room. My laptop glowed in the darkness. Bank statements, loans records, transfer histories, guarantees, agreements, years of financial support, thousands upon thousands of dollars, a mountain of proof nobody knew existed. I stared at the documents for a long time. Then I created a folder and a plan. Because if my family wanted to show me exactly where I stood in their lives, I was finally ready to show them what life looked like without me. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt strangely peaceful. Not because my family stopped causing problems, because I stopped expecting anything from them. That change made all the difference. While Megan obsessed over centerpieces and social media announcements, Ethan and I focused on our future. We finalized seating charts, met with vendors, planned our honeymoon, and for the first time in years, I stopped volunteering to solve everyone else's emergencies. Almost immediately, people noticed. Dad called asking if I could temporarily help with a payment for one of his business accounts. I declined. Megan complained that her wedding planner wanted additional deposits. I didn't offer assistance. Every request was met with the same polite answer, no. Not rude, not angry, just no. The reactions were fascinating. People who had ignored my needs for years suddenly seemed deeply concerned about my attitude. Apparently, boundaries felt offensive when someone was accustomed to unlimited access. Then came the final confirmation that I meant absolutely nothing to them. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother accidentally forwarded me an email chain. I don't think she realized I was included. At first, I almost deleted it. Then I noticed the subject line, Memorial Day attendance planning. My stomach tightened. I opened it. The messages were between Dad, Megan, several relatives, and family friends. What I read changed everything. Dad had personally encouraged family members to attend Megan's engagement party. He described my wedding as a small ceremony, a private event, a celebration that wouldn't really notice a few absences. Meanwhile, Megan referred to her party as the major family gathering of the year. Dozens of relatives responded. Almost all of them planned to attend her event. Not mine. Not because they couldn't, because they were encouraged not to. I stared at the screen for several minutes. Then I closed the email. No tears, no anger, no disappointment, because disappointment only exists when hope remains, and mine was finally gone. That night, Ethan found me sitting quietly on our balcony. The city lights shimmered below. "You look peaceful," he said. "I think I finally accepted something." "What?" I looked at him. "My family isn't going to change." He sat beside me. "No, they'll keep taking. Probably. They'll they'll keep choosing Megan. Most likely." I nodded. "Then I'm done pretending otherwise." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan smiled. "I've been waiting for you to realize that." The wedding week arrived faster than expected. Savannah was beautiful. Warm spring air, historic streets, riverfront views. Everything looked exactly the way we imagined. Ethan's parents arrived 2 days early. His mother helped organize decorations. His father handled last-minute details. They treated me like family without hesitation, without conditions, without expectations. It felt almost unfamiliar. The night before the ceremony, Mom called. She was crying. Immediately, I knew why. "Are you coming tomorrow?" I asked. Silence, then a shaky breath. "Your father doesn't want us leaving Megan's event." There it was, the final answer, the final choice. I closed my eyes. "I understand." "Natalie, it's okay, Mom." But it wasn't, and we both knew it. After hanging up, I walked onto the balcony alone. Below me, Savannah glowed beneath thousands of lights. For years, I had imagined my wedding day, my father walking me down the aisle, family photographs, celebrations. And now I understood none of those things were going to happen. And strangely enough, I felt relieved, because reality had finally caught up with the truth. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Rain clouds drifted across the horizon. The city looked silver beneath the morning light. As makeup artists and bridesmaids prepared around me, I checked my phone one final time. No message from Dad. No message from Megan. Nothing. Hours later, I stood behind the chapel doors holding my bouquet. My wedding coordinator smiled. "Ready?" I took a deep breath, then nodded. The doors opened. Music filled the chapel. And my heart broke. Because the first thing I noticed wasn't Ethan. It was the empty seats. Entire rows on my side sat vacant. Seats reserved for family members who had chosen somewhere else. Seats reserved for people I had spent years helping. People I had sacrificed for. People who weren't there. I forced myself to keep walking. One step, then another, then another. Finally, my eyes reached the altar, and everything changed. Because Ethan was standing there, looking at me as though I was the only person in the world. His eyes immediately filled with tears. Not because of the dress, not because of the ceremony, because of me. That realization nearly destroyed every wall I had built around my heart. I continued down the aisle alone. No father beside me, no family behind me, just myself. And somehow that felt symbolic, because I had spent most of my life carrying myself anyway. When I finally reached him, Ethan immediately took both of my hands. A smile spread across his face. "You're here." Such simple words, yet they felt more meaningful than every speech my father had ever given. For the first time that day, I smiled. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt loved. The ceremony passed in a beautiful blur. I remember pieces of it more than the whole thing. The warmth of Ethan's hands, the soft glow of candlelight against the chapel walls, the quiet sound of rain tapping against stained glass windows, and the promise he made that nearly broke me. "I will never make you earn my love." My throat tightened immediately, because without realizing it, I had spent my entire life doing exactly that, working for approval, competing for attention, sacrificing for affection, giving more than I received. Yet standing there beside Ethan, I finally understood something important. Real love doesn't keep score. Real love doesn't make you beg. Real love simply stays. When the ceremony ended and we were announced as husband and wife, the guests erupted into applause. For the first time all day, The empty seats didn't matter, because the people who truly wanted to be there were already present. The reception took place in a beautiful riverside ballroom overlooking Savannah's waterfront. Nothing extravagant, just elegant. Warm lighting, fresh flowers, live music, good food, exactly what Ethan and I wanted. His family blended effortlessly with my friends and military colleagues. Laughter filled the room. Conversations flowed naturally, and little by little I began forgetting about everything that had happened. Almost. During dinner, one of my commanding officers raised a glass. "I've worked with Natalie for almost 8 years." The room grew quiet. He smiled toward me. "She's one of the most dependable people I've ever met." Several guests nodded. "If you call her at 3 o'clock in the morning during a crisis, she'll answer." More laughter. "If you need help, she'll show up." A few people clapped. Then his expression softened. "But the thing I admire most is that she never asks for recognition." The ballroom became silent. "So tonight, I think it's appropriate we recognize her anyway." The applause that followed felt overwhelming. I looked down quickly before anyone noticed the tears gathering in my eyes, because strangers were celebrating qualities my own family had ignored for years. Later, Ethan and I shared our first dance, then another and another. For a few precious hours, life felt light, simple, happy, exactly as a wedding should. Then my phone rang. Mom. I hesitated before answering. The noise of the reception faded as I stepped into a quiet hallway. "Natalie?" Her voice sounded shaky. "I'm here." In the background, I could hear loud music, people cheering, glasses clinking, Megan's engagement party. "I just wanted to say congratulations." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." Several seconds passed. Then she began crying. "I should have been there." The pain in her voice sounded genuine, but it didn't change anything. "You made your choice, Mom." "No," she whispered immediately. "Your father made it for everyone." That sounded painfully believable. I could hear Megan laughing somewhere nearby. Dad talking to guests, celebrating, pretending everything was normal. Mom lowered her voice. "Your father said it would look bad if family members left Megan's party." Of course he did. Everything had always revolved around protecting Megan, protecting her feelings, protecting her image, protecting her happiness. I leaned against the wall. Something inside me finally went cold. Not angry, not hurt. Finished. Completely finished. "I need to go," Mom whispered. Before hanging up, she said one last thing. "I love you." The line disconnected. I stared at my phone for several moments, then I turned it off. When I returned to the ballroom, Ethan immediately noticed. "What happened?" "Nothing important." He knew I was lying, but he didn't push. Instead, he pulled me onto the dance floor. The band had started playing a slow song. He wrapped his arms around me. I rested my head against his shoulder. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly asked, "What happens if your father never changes?" I thought about that, really thought about it. Then I gave the answer that surprised even me. "Then he loses me." Ethan nodded. Exactly. No dramatic speech, no complicated advice, just truth. Hours later, the reception settled at perfect stage where everyone feels relaxed and happy. People were laughing, dancing, taking photos, sharing stories. The atmosphere felt warm and intimate, the way celebrations should feel. Eventually, it was time to cut the cake. Guests gathered around us holding champagne glasses. The photographer adjusted his camera. Someone shouted for us to kiss. Ethan laughed. I smiled. Then my phone vibrated. Once, twice, 3 times. I frowned. The phone wasn't supposed to be on. Confused, I pulled it from my clutch. The screen lit up. "Dad." Another message appeared immediately. "Call me now." Then another. "What did you do?" Then another. "Megan is hysterical." My heartbeat slowed, not faster, slower, because suddenly The plan had worked. Months earlier, after my family chose Megan over me, I stopped preparing for socialization. I started preparing for freedom. Every financial rescue, every hidden payment, every emergency transfer, every account connected to my support, every debt I quietly covered, every obligation I protected them from. I had documented everything. And tonight, at the exact moment Ethan and I cut our wedding cake, that protection ended legally, permanently. Another message appeared. The country club says payment was canceled. Around me, guests continued smiling and celebrating. They had no idea an entirely different event across town was collapsing. Ethan glanced at my expression. "What is it?" Slowly, I looked up at him. Then I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, my family was finally discovering what happened when their safety net disappeared. And the worst part? They still didn't realize that safety net had been me all along. For several seconds, I simply stared at the messages. The ballroom around me blurred into background noise. Guests laughed, champagne glasses clinked, music floated through the air. Meanwhile, less than 5 miles away, my family's carefully constructed world was coming apart. Ethan stepped closer. "You want to tell me what's happening?" I looked at him, then handed him my phone. He read the messages quietly. His eyebrows rose. "What payments are they talking about?" I exhaled slowly. "All of them." The realization hit him immediately. "The engagement party?" I nodded. "The business loans, the emergency accounts, the debt payments, the mortgage protection, everything." For years, my father believed his financial problems had magically worked themselves out. Whenever disaster appeared, somehow things stabilized. Bills got paid, deadlines got extended, accounts recovered. He called it luck. He called it perseverance. Sometimes he called it a blessing. The truth was much simpler. It was me, every time. 6 years earlier, Dad's business had nearly collapsed after several terrible investments. I quietly stepped in. Then Megan's finances fell apart after her divorce. I stepped in again. Then came tax problems, medical expenses, debt consolidation, school tuition for Megan's son, mortgage shortages, business obligations. Every crisis ended the same way. I paid, and nobody noticed. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself family helps family. But over time, something changed. The more I sacrificed, the more entitled they became. Eventually, to my support became invisible, not appreciated, expected. When Megan announced her engagement party on my wedding day, something inside me finally woke up. For the first time, I stopped asking how to save them. Instead, I asked whether they deserved saving at all. 3 months before the wedding, I created a plan. Every account connected to my financial support was reviewed, every obligation documented, every emergency guarantee cataloged. Then I scheduled one email, a single email set to send automatically at 8:45 p.m. on my wedding night. The exact moment Ethan and I cut our cake. Recipients included Dad, Megan, Brandon, their attorney, the country club, several lenders, and attached to that email was years of proof. Bank transfers, loan guarantees, payment histories, tax settlements, debt coverage, every dollar I had spent protecting people who barely acknowledged my existence. Ethan stared at me. "You carried all of that alone?" I smiled sadly. "Most of it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then my phone rang again. "Dad." This time I answered. The second the call connected, chaos exploded through the speaker. People were shouting. Someone was crying. Megan sounded furious. Dad sounded panicked. "Natalie, what did you do?" I remained calm. "I'm at my wedding reception. The country club says the payment account was canceled." "Correct." Silence. Then confusion. "What account?" That question almost broke my heart. Because even now, he still didn't know. After all those years, after everything, he genuinely had no idea where the money came from. "You thought your business survived on its own?" I asked quietly. Nothing. Just silence. Then Brandon's voice appeared somewhere in the background. "Wait. What does she mean?" Megan immediately snapped. "She's exaggerating." Same old Megan. Deny, deflect, blame. Dad's voice lowered. The email, Natalie. What is all of this? There it was. The moment. The exact second my father finally saw me. Not as the dependable daughter, not as the backup plan, not as the emergency contact, as the person who had been holding everything together. I paid your tax debt 3 years ago. Silence. I covered the second mortgage when refinancing failed. More silence. I paid Megan's tuition debt. Nothing. I funded her son's education account. Then came Brandon's stunned voice. You paid for what? Apparently, Megan hadn't shared that information. An argument immediately erupted behind him. Dad sounded smaller now, older somehow. You were paying for all of it? I stared through the ballroom window at the river reflecting city lights. Then I finally said the words I had waited years to say. You chose your favorite daughter. My voice remained calm, so I stopped paying to be treated like your least favorite one. The line went completely silent. Then the shouting started again, but this time it wasn't directed at me. It was directed at each other. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for cleaning up the mess, and it felt incredible. The fallout arrived quickly. By morning, Brandon had left the engagement party. Within days, he ended the relationship. Apparently, discovering that your fiancé's financial stability depended on her younger sister wasn't attractive. Dad's business creditors began calling. Old obligations resurfaced. The mortgage problems returned. Everything I had quietly protected them from came back at once. Meanwhile, Ethan and I spent our honeymoon walking beaches and enjoying something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not revenge, not victory, peace. The difference mattered. One evening, several days into the trip, Mom called again. This time I answered. She sounded exhausted. Your father isn't sleeping. I leaned against a balcony overlooking the ocean. What do you want me to do about that? Long silence. Then she whispered, He's ashamed. For some reason, that hurt more than anger ever could, because shame meant he finally understood. 3 months later, Dad sold the house. The same backyard where Megan announced her engagement now displayed a for sale sign. The business downsized. Megan moved into a smaller apartment. Relatives slowly learned the truth. Phone calls started arriving, apologies, shock, regret. Most claimed they had no idea. Maybe they didn't. But ignorance doesn't erase participation. Life moved forward. Ethan and I settled into our new home after my reassignment. We built routines, shared dinners, argued over paint colors, laughed about ridiculous things. For the first time in my adult life, I stopped waiting for a family emergency. Then one rainy evening, there was a knock on our front door. I already knew who it was. Dad stood on the porch. He looked older, smaller. The confidence he once carried had vanished. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly asked, Can I come in? We sat across from each other in the living room. Rain tapped against the windows. The silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. I didn't understand. I waited. You never asked for help. There it was, the misunderstanding that had shaped my entire life. I looked directly at him. So, you assumed I didn't need love? His eyes immediately filled. No. But that's what happened. He lowered his head. I thought Megan was more fragile. I almost laughed. Fragile? The woman who manipulated entire rooms whenever she didn't get her way? The woman who never accepted responsibility? The woman everyone protected? Meanwhile, I survived deployments, crises, and years of neglect. Yet somehow I was expected to carry everything quietly forever. Dad's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? For the first time, I answered honestly. Because I wanted a father who loved me before he knew what I could provide. The room went silent. Then something happened that I never expected to see. My father cried. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly. The way broken people cry when they finally face the truth. After several minutes, he whispered, "Strong daughters still need their fathers, don't they?" My throat tightened. Yes. A tear slipped down his cheek. I wish I'd known. So do I. When he finally stood to leave, neither of us pretended that everything was fixed. Some wounds heal, others simply become part of you. At the door, he paused, then looked back. I am proud of you, Natalie. The words arrived years late, but for once, they were genuine. After he drove away, my phone vibrated. A text message. I love you. I always did. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then Ethan wrapped his arms around me from behind. Outside, rain continued falling softly. Inside, for the first time in my life, I let the past go, because being the strong one doesn't mean being unbreakable, and being dependable doesn't mean being disposable. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stop carrying people who never learn to walk on their own. And sometimes letting go is how you finally become free.